Our first film on the wildlife of Ladakh, the land of Buddha, was almost 3 years in the making. And yet we had hardly covered all the animal species that were to be found there. This was the area known as the Changthang Plateau on the border of India and Tibet. For both animals and humans, this high altitude desert is a harsh home. Here, the air is thin and oxygen starved. Working at this high altitude is not only tough, but it's also dangerous. Ladakh has frustratingly long distances, high passes, sands, snows, and even lakes, across which tons of our equipment and provisions had to be moved. Month after month, by vehicles, yaks and ponies, and finally on our backs too. The rarest bird in Ladakh is the Tibetan black-necked crane. Only about 5 pairs are known to visit Ladakh. These majestic cranes are regarded as auspicious and are protected not only by law but more importantly by the love of local Changpa nomads. The cranes too seems to feel safe among the yaks, sheep and goats. To get close to these birds, we finally resorted to the traditional dress, the goncha. From the close frontiers of Changthang Plateau, we bring you the film, Ladakh, Desert in the Skies.
The mountainous desert of Ladakh. Here little stands in the path of the frozen wind as it sweeps down through the high passes of the Himalayas. This harsh landscape of forbidding grandeur is the highest inhabited area on the face of our earth, the roof of the world. Those who live here, animals and people, are shaped by the severity and fierce beauty of this Arctic desert in the skies. The Himalayas stretch across the north face of India and form a barrier which prevents rain clouds reaching the wilderness of Ladakh. Today, the region is a high-altitude desert with only 2 or 3 inches of rain a year. Ladakh forms the northernmost part of India, sharing disputed borders with China and Pakistan. Because of the political sensitivity of the area, eastern Ladakh has been closed to outsiders for almost 40 years. This is the first time cameras have traveled within the closed frontiers of the Changthang Plateau, which straddles the borders of India and Tibet. It is the land of the Changpa nomads, the Bedouin of the high desert, who move with the seasons in search of fresh pastures for their flocks. It's autumn, and this group are moving their animals to their traditional wintering grounds. In the past, the Changpa ran the yak caravan from Ladakh's capital, Leh, to Tibet on the old Silk Road trade route. Today, they are herdsmen, and instead of silk and spices, the yaks carry all the nomads' worldly belongings. Each family has their own yak hair tent, an important asset, and as much a status symbol as the number and condition of their livestock. Every tent is decorated with bushy yak tails. The head of this family is 50-year-old Mingyu. To support his extended family, Mingyu has 50 goats and sheep and 15 yaks. It's just after daybreak on a cold November morning, and Mingyu's daughters, Dolma and Fonsok, tether the goats for milking. Among the Changpa nomads, it is the sole responsibility of the women to milk the animals, make yogurt, and churn the valuable butter. Children learn young in the desert. Each has his or her tasks, and they're proud of their growing skills. The boys and men are responsible for herding and tending the flocks. Mingyu and his family live at an average height of 16,000 feet. The air is thin and oxygen-starved, and in winter the temperature drops to -40 degrees. Any light snowfall is quickly burnt off by the high winds. Grazing is scarce and jealously guarded. Here, every mountain, valley and pasture is divided among the different nomad clans. Trespassing on another's grazing land results in acrimony and a heavy fine. The yaks can survive on the poorest of vegetation, and yet a bull can weigh 1/4 of a ton. They move with surprising agility, even at altitudes of 20,000 feet. Once large herds of wild yaks roamed freely over these high pastures. But today, only a small population survives in the remotest parts of the plateau. Sharing the pastures with Mingyu's yaks and goats is a herd of Tibetan wild asses, known locally as kiangs. They're considerably bigger than a domestic donkey and are at home in the high wilderness of Changtang. In the past, the nomads used to hunt kiangs, but now they're officially protected. In recent years, numbers have increased, and life for the kiang is starting to look up. Frescoes on the walls of Tibetan monasteries often show the protecting goddess Paldan Lamo riding on a kiang, and the association has helped discourage Buddhist nomads at least from harming the animal. Mingyur's flocks must double as pack animals, helping transport the family's basic provisions. The movement of the flocks has not been missed by the nomads' greatest enemy. Only a few hours ago, this wolf pack killed a pony belonging to one of Mingyur's group. They've eaten their fill now, but soon they'll kill again. Ravens move in quickly for their share of the kill, but not quite quickly enough, and soon have to give way to a pair of griffon vultures. Central to the lives of the Changpa is Tibetan Buddhism, which teaches a reverence for all life. But a wolf pack can decimate a flock, and without their animals, the nomads' own lives are threatened. The herdsmen have no option. At the intersection of the trails often used by the wolves, the nomads have set up permanent wolf pits called shangdong. Families take turns to provide a goat or a sheep as bait. As the goat's owner pushes it into the pit, he murmurs a brief prayer. Om Mane Peme Hum, the Tibetan invocation for the salvation of all living creatures. By calling for the rest of its flock, the goat will unwittingly attract the wolf pack. The main winter activity for the men is the collection of fuel for their fires, brushwood, shrubs and juniper branches. This is burnt along with yak dung and goat's droppings, which burn more slowly, and so the fire lasts longer. After 20 days, a lone wolf has fallen into the trap. Sometimes, driven by hunger, a whole pack of wolves will leap into the pit, and their deaths are celebrated by the whole community. Government inspectors leave warnings that in India the wolf is a protected animal, but the nearest inspector may be 1,000 miles away. Mingyur has invited Buddhist monks to bless the family and forecast an auspicious date for the spring movement of the clan. The tent altar is decorated. Mingyur's wife, Pemba, is wearing her turquoise-studded headdress for the occasion. The young monk is Mingyur's own son. He became a monk at the age of 10 and will spend his life in the service of the Buddha. It is now May, early spring in Changtang, and the melt has begun. The sun unlocks the water held in the mountain snows. It's the only source of water the desert will enjoy until next spring. The swollen streams bring new life to the frozen marsh of the Hanlei, an oasis about 5 miles wide. For Mingyur and his family, the first move of the year is always the most difficult. His animals are at their weakest and most vulnerable, but he's been lucky. All have safely reached the lush green grass of Hanlei. There are 10 families in Mingyur's clan, and they all make the move together. Here, the clan has a permanent campsite. The shallow tent pits provide greater headroom, but allow the tent to present a low profile to the biting wind. In the centre, a hearth waits for this season's fire. The yak tent is impregnated with smoke, fat and butter, and it's so heavy that it had to be divided among several yaks for the journey. Only a nomad who owns yaks can afford a tent of this size and quality. The first thing Pemba does is set up her family altar in honour of both the Buddha and their own protecting deities. The nomads know when each of their pastures will provide the best grazing. The summer's short and the animals must store as much fat as they can to survive the bleak winter. This spring, as every spring, the arrival of the nomads at Hanlei coincides with that of one of India's rarest birds, the black-necked crane. The valley has echoed to their courtship for thousands of years.
cha trong trong chưa sinh năng gyal cho nó lab di năng là cha trong trong gyal cho nó thang gi năng là cha trong trong gyal cho nó cha trong trong ni yo ka nó nam yang ni nham lần đó thế cha trong trong lại lượng mang bu yon lu ji e dục yong ji yang cha la cha cha ma cha rang yang yang de ka ne cha na yang wa la so cha 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 la cha cha mong rang yong yong de ja la na yang wa la so cha cha.
Ornithologists still don't know for certain where the cranes come from. Here in the marsh, the cranes will find insects, grasses and sometimes fish, ample food on which to raise their young. The majestic cranes are protected, not only by the law, but far more importantly, by the love of the Changpa. Mingyur's eldest son lives with his wife, but has come to help his father with one of the trickier tasks of the season. It's midsummer, and yaks are beginning to feel the heat. They no longer need the soft wool which protects them in winter, but it is valuable to the nomads, who spin it into cloths, blankets and carpets. Because the yaks are left to graze untended for long periods, they never become completely domesticated.
Zulmo Burmo Ongali, Zulmo Burmo, the Champari, Zulmo Burmo, no, Pimu Zulmunga Champa, Tamu, Dukan Sonti, Yang, Sati, Kamba Samala Zulmonji, the Zulmuchona, Tandevela, Najan, Rongi, Yul, Rongi, the Cover Large Wing Chant, and the young Lava, the Lapa Canton, the Lapa, the young La Lung Tainted Engine, the Layana, Memelama, when the Kurim to Engine, Kurim Jogushin, the Kurim, the Jurip, the other Penchas in the Tuni.
Nomads from different clans have come to pay their respects to their spiritual leader, Sotsé Rinpoche, who's just emerged from a month's solitary retreat. The Rinpoche is a reincarnated Lama. He lived in Tibet before Chinese occupation. Several families have dedicated their young daughters to the religious life, and they live at the Rinpoche's small nunnery on a mound in the center of the marshland. The nunnery, one of the few in Ladakh, has 30 young chomos, or nuns. They divide their time between prayers, meditation and learning under the supervision of their guru. The cranes have chosen a nesting site close to the nunnery.